Servers Pioneers, we're really excited to be here. And amidst this whole craze in Bitcoin prices, ICO markets, and other tokens, we are very excited to discuss a super timely topic, which is blockchain and its impact on society and more generally how the world works. My name is Laura Grimmelman, and I'm an investor with Axel Partners. And I'm very excited to be here and discuss this topic with Jack from Web 3.0 and Chris from Golem. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jack Platts. I work at the Web3 Foundation. The Web3 Foundation main project is called Polkadot, which is a protocol. But we also invest in grant money to a lot of different decentralized protocols, all of which with the idea of stewarding decentralization into the future.
My name is Chris. I work at Golem. Golem is a marketplace for computing power, a distributed marketplace for computing power. So basically, if you want to sell a little bit of unused power of your computers, or if a university wants to sell 5,000 cores of processing power that they don't use usually, you can do that through our platform. And you can also buy it through our platform. We are one of these projects that started very early. That did ICO in a token sale in late 2016, and now we're actually 35 people and live on mainnet, so we have good perspective on how that road looks from the perspective of a project.
So actually, first, I'd love to take a step back from the hype and talk about the 10 to 15-year vision for blockchain in the ecosystem and its impact that it hopefully is going to have on the world. Jack, what do you guys at Web 3.0 think about the space?
Sure. So it's a little hard to predict where it's all going because it changes so quickly. Every month there's a new technology being released, a new team being formed, and a new dream that people have formed to chase. But what we're working on at the Web3 Foundation is a technology stack. So everything from a peer-to-peer network, very fundamental, that enables us to communicate in a decentralized way, all the way up to a browser. So something that we would all interact with on a user level. And within that, there's about 8 or 9 different technologies in this stack, many teams within each of the boxes. And Polkadot is one of them, Ethereum is one of them, and they're just one of the 8. So though the prices of the major blockchain protocols go up a lot, there's a lot of work that needs to be done where you can't necessarily attach a token to it, so it's a little bit hard to fund. So we're focused at the Web3 Foundation on funding these projects that may not otherwise get funding.
How about you, Chris? What made you guys, in 2016, already ICO and get interested in the decentralization of the
Well, I think it started for the founders of Golem way before, because they were working on Ethereum before even Ethereum was launched, right? So I think this technology is very exciting because internet, the centralized version of the internet that we have right now is pretty amazing because we can use it. We use it hundreds of times a day, especially everybody in this room, and it works great for some things. It works not so great for some other things, which we're discovering now, right? Which some people have seen before and started working on that a little bit earlier. But we have this great vision for that, but I also think it's very hard to predict. Like, I like going to the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, and there is a section with Apple, I think Apple or IBM poster from 1984, and they were trying to figure out how people are going to be using the technology that they're building, right? So they had the poster is a computer, and it's in the kitchen. There's a woman smiling into the camera, and the poster says, "The last kitchen recipe holder that you are ever going to need," which is, it ended up pretty far from that because somebody came with a spreadsheet and with a lot of these things. So I think we have a lot of things that we're imagining about blockchain, but I think we're going to also discover a lot of new uses if we enable developers to build them.
And that's the major thing, is it's difficult. Whenever the internet was created decades ago, it was difficult to imagine Uber 30 years, 40 years later.
Yeah.
So whenever we're building the base layer protocols, the picks and shovels, the infrastructure, it's difficult to imagine what people are going to be using this for. We have hopes what people are going to be using this for, but it's to predict exactly what's going to be happening in 20 years is difficult.
Yeah. But I think if we now look at the news today and all this hype that has been forming over 2017 and the past couple of months, what is this all about? It's not really about building a new internet. It seems to be about making profits, speculation. There's a new token every day that sends a pitch deck that ends on my desk. And it's really hard to see what's going on right now. Chris?
It is. People are very excited about prices because, get rich quick and watch Wolf of Wall Street and these things, right? But if you take out your favorite app for tracking coin prices and you look at the list of first 1,000 coins that are there, 95% of them aren't going to exist in 2 years. Their value is going to go down to 0, right? So if you want an easy way to track that, check the price of something like DentaCoin, which in peak was worth $2 billion, and there was one dentist that was accepting it as payment. We need the separate blockchain for dentists, right? So this is very, very, far away. And I just came back from Blockchain Week in New York, which had some great conferences like Imperial and Token Summit, but which also had this whole consensus with 8,500 people that didn't care too much about building. They just cared about speculation and, both parties with Aston Martins and Ripple parties with Snoop Dogg's. And I'm part of Ethereum ecosystem, so I'm biased towards that. But Ethereum evening event at Blockchain Week New York was 5 researchers or 4 researchers just chatting about how to solve scalability challenges on the technology layer, right? And that was this is something that I'm way more excited about.
Yeah, it seems, and I'm not an insider. I'm just looking at this as an outside VC investor, but it seems like actually it's having almost a negative impact right now. Because there's a lot of wealth being created, but only for the few and the speculators, who are either early technologists and early adopters, or were there at the right time. And so yeah, I do hope also that over time this craze dies down and people actually start to focus on the technology, which is so exciting and which could really lead to so many applications, and in the end, humans gaining right over their own data and other really fundamental human rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we're working for. That's is for people to be in control of those things, those fundamental things to themselves. But as far as technology goes, whenever there's a new life cycle, whenever there's a new technology born, we see a rush and a frenzy. Oftentimes, it's the whole Gartner hype cycle. It's Carletta Perez's thesis, is that, you look at the .com, for example. In the United States, just until a couple years ago, we were still turning on fiber from the .com boom. So we were putting in a lot of wire that didn't necessarily need to be there at the time because we could invest in it. Same with multiple tracks all across England whenever railroads finally became a booming innovation and people recognized it as such. So I think there's a moment that people are recognizing as that right now, which is super exciting. Mm-hmm. But it brings in, of course, a lot of people using it for all sorts of things it wasn't intended for. What we're working on at the Web3 Foundation and Golem, of course, is thinking 10, 20 years out. What does the world look like? Whenever Facebook doesn't necessarily own our data, but we own it. What's it look like whenever a bank doesn't necessarily hold our money, but we hold our money? What does it look like whenever, maybe 50 years down the line, whenever we hold our own sovereignty, perhaps, or some sort of national state that could coexist alongside the ones we know today? It's about organizing ourselves in a fundamentally better way. There's great organizations that have existed up until now, from the church to the state to corporations. And if you're an optimist, you believe we're going to continue to find new ways to organize ourselves that are more equal, more fair, and allow us to have more independence as just individuals. So while the rush of money does come along and people pump up the prices to make money, it's there's another narrative in the background that's going to be here long after those 95% of tokens are gone.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with that. And all the best people that I know that are working on that aren't thinking is there some impact in blockchain? But they all work in the space because it's the same for them. Like, this is one of the most impactful things that they could be working on in the space, right? And this is why they come. And yes, it's going to change how you govern things. Like, I really like Ethereum Foundation. Somebody from Ethereum Foundation recently wrote about that the ultimate customer of Ethereum is civilization. So we're going to build with civilization in mind, right?
Yeah.
And why this is like, you know, it's a big statement. Like, I agree with that. Like, there is probably better way to organize a lot of things.
Yeah. But if we now sort of take a different step back and actually talk about the technology, and where are we right now? Because it's early days, as you said, in the hype cycle. What are the things that we really need to fix?
Wow, so many, right? So there are so many things that we need to fix. But when you look at the time scale of how long this has been happening for, it's not that long. So when you look at the centralized version of the internet, which works incredibly well for a lot of things and will be still the only choice for a lot of those things, even this 10 years in, it was created over years and years and years, like decades. Like everything that the centralized internet is built on basically was created at Bell Labs, so like 40 years ago or even more, right? And the big phone companies in US had the incentive to create that in a centralized way because if you lived on East Coast and I'm living on West Coast, like I couldn't call you. Like the phone lines were there, but it didn't work well enough. So they were like, these are really hard problems in engineering and in physics that nobody has solved. So we have to set up structures that will focus on solving that for 15 years, and then we're going to be okay, right? We're probably going to solve that. So they got the best physicists, the best engineers, and we just started that. We just started that like you know, this decade. So it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out the fundamental research, and there are going to be a bunch of breakthroughs on the way. I think now there's really good group of people working on that, and we're going to get there.
And adding to that, I mean, the analogy between the phone lines between the East and West Coast is like a question of throughput. It's a connection of latency, and we're all working on those things now. Ethereum has slightly more transactions than Bitcoin as compared to Visa. It's multiple times, but in the next iteration beyond Ethereum, whether it's layer 2 or a whole new protocol, will be another magnitude or a quantum leap forward. So it's getting our hands dirty on the research and really learning some of the fundamental physics things that we need to figure out to get us there.
Yeah, I actually found it really interesting when in January, like CryptoKitties, I guess the first sort of application on Ethereum that people were actually using, like the average person who was not a developer was trying to use, kind of took down the network.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that was great, right?
That was a great moment for the community.
Yeah, it was a real stress test of the network, right? And showing where we are, and the company is doing well. They raised funding from Andreessen Horowitz and other people, and you know, there is so much that we still have to do in terms of scalability. But the projects are on the way. The Plasma is on the way. Casper is on the way, and I think my bet is on Ethereum solving these problems first, just because it's like. Group of people that really believes in what they are doing and also has really strong brains behind the research.
Yeah.
And it was cool to see that happen because it's also a reminder of what we're building on top of. So if CryptoKitties existed on Web 2.0, for example, where it's social driven, then if they experienced 100,000 new users overnight, they can call up Amazon Web Services and say, hey, Amazon Web Services, I am going to break my website. My website's down. Can you get us back up? And Amazon could have done that and scaled them up, no problem. But there's no Ethereum and company you can call and say, look, I'm stressing the network out, so like let's turn on some more servers in Nevada. So it's a nice reminder that we're working on a total new infrastructure, a new technology stack, and it's just total blue ocean as far as these problems go, and folks coming out and solving them and learning more about it.
And AWS, Amazon Web Services, is going to do very well, right? And they're going to be around for a long time because they are great and at what they do. On the other side of the equation, if you were doing something that was not in line with their policy, you couldn't get computing power from them at all. And you might make case that as science pushes everything forward, and you need a lot of computing power to do a lot of kinds of science right now. Like this should be basic, unstoppable human rights. So like you're gonna, for example, be able to get it from Golem if you can't get it from Amazon, like years out. But yeah. And so there are trade-offs with everything.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to censorship. Whenever Catalonia had their little revolution, should those individuals be able to have the tools to be able to contact their family when Facebook and WhatsApp are inevitably turned off, even in a Western country, and say, hey, I'm OK. You know, this is where I am. How are you? We're hoping that that everyone agrees that the answer is yes. They should have the tools in their power to be able to contact their loved ones or organize if need be. So I mentioned the decentralized stack and the 8 or 9 things in there. One of them is decentralized communication. So there's many different projects, one of which is called Whisper, which is Ethereum-based or partly funded. And they're building a protocol without a token attached. So us at the Web3 Foundation recognize that that's a need that needs to be filled, and we're spending our time, resources on funding something that we're not necessarily going to get any return from, and we're a foundation, so it's not in our purview anyway. But that's going to benefit and allow us to build these decentralized applications where people can talk with each other, people can organize, people can be in control of their own destiny.
Yeah. And again, this is what core people in the space, in the Ethereum ecosystem care about, right? You watch a talk by new executive director of the foundation, Ayako Miyaguchi, and she talks about impact, right? Like how to solve social challenges, also using this technology. Or Vitalik asked a great question on Twitter in December 2017. He said that crypto market has just reached cumulative valuation market cap of $500 billion, but have we earned it? Like how many in a bank have we banked and things like that, right? And this is what everybody in the space should be asking them, and most people are at the core of this research. Like it's just the people who are like, instead of, hey, what's our impact, are like, hey, here's our party, and here's Snoop Dogg at our party, like usually gets a lot of attention in the media, right? But this is not what this space is about.
And actually, I found it interesting when we talked earlier, Jack, about how the community is also addressing sort of the inequality of token distribution and who's holding them, because that is a big sort of challenge for a lot of projects, because tokens funnel wealth, I guess, to a couple of holders who then become very wealthy.
Yeah. The Gini coefficient, people look at these things and study them across the different protocols and so forth. And it's a great question. You have to compare it to something too, right? So if you've been to San Francisco lately, it's not the nicest place to live unless you are early on in some of these other these Web 2.0 technologies and these Web 2.0 companies. But what Ethereum's trying to do and what we at Web3 Foundation and with Polkadot are trying to do is actually allow people to invest in themselves more than, say, investing their time and effort in a network where their data and otherwise are farmed out to third parties.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much.
We should probably also cover, like...
Let's talk about more.
No, I mean, like, there are ways to go in terms of scalability and throughput, but like you're working on that, Ethereum Foundation working on that. It's like all the big projects like are aware that this is happening, so that it needs to happen faster, and are taking ownership of that. So for example, Web3 and Golem and Omisa and Cosmos and Status like created together Ethereum Community Fund, right? So like, you know, to basically put in the grants, you know, put money to use, giving out grants. Like if you're working at Google and you want to quit your well-paid job to research something that would help Ethereum ecosystem, and that doesn't exactly fit VC thesis, so you can't go to Laura to get VC funding, right? You would approach Ethereum Community Fund to get grant for like this research, for this work that everybody will benefit in. Like the only way we could proceed faster probably is to get even more qualified people into the space even faster and onboard them. People that know how to build companies, how to scale companies, and things like that. But we're getting there, and you know. I think it's going to be OK.
We are, and it's a test bed for experimentation, whether it's research or whether it's new ways to organize and govern ourselves, and it's open source, right? So anyone can join.
Hopefully, we meet here next year, and Laura will be working on the crypto side. We'll get all these people inside.
And I hope some of the people in this room will as well. I think what's so exciting is it's so early, and it's such an open community, and it is incredibly easy to get involved and actually work as part of open source projects. And there's so much great talent coming into the space that's actually tackling these basic issues, such as scalability. We're going to talk later about Lightning, for instance, which is a really cool Bitcoin sort of layer 2 scaling project, which is really focusing on these kinds of fundamental issues. And watch the space. I think this will be very exciting in the many years to come. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.